Candace Owens said this, or if Nick Fuentes or Tucker Carlson said this, the response would be that this is a anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Let's listen to Marco Rubio's words. I want you guys to listen to this very carefully, and then we're going to discuss. Here's Marco Rubio.
Been asked is, why now? Well, there's two reasons why now. The first is it was abundantly clear that if Iran came under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond against the United States. The orders had been delegated down to the field commanders. It was automatic, and in fact, it bared to be true, because in fact, within an hour of the initial attack on the leadership compound, the missile forces in the south and in the north, for that matter, had already been activated to launch. In fact, those had already been pre-positioned. The third is the assessment that was made that if we stood and waited for that attack to come first, before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that would precipitate an attack against American forces, and we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that it didn't happen. Going back.
So there you have it. Did you hear that? We knew it was a certainty that Israel was going to attack, and we knew that Iran was going to respond with retaliatory attacks to Israel, but also to us. That is quite an admission. Because if that's true, then what Marco Rubio is saying is that Israel got us into this war. Israel was going to do something that, but just by the way, obviously this is not a shock to anyone who listens to this show, but the shocking part is that Marco Rubio is admitting it. But he's saying straight up that Israel was going to do something that was going to result in our boys dying. And we knew that. And so we had no choice but to join with Israel and get into this war. A war that the American people do not want, a war that many of the top generals did not want, and a war that, at least at some point, at least previously, Donald Trump didn't want, because he himself predicted what a disaster it would be. A war that Tulsi Gabbard has spent a career pretending she doesn't want. A war that J.D. Vance has pretended he doesn't want. A war that Bobby Kennedy, okay, I know he's at the health department, but whatever, there's other people in the government there. Everybody going into this, it's really important to make this point, that like, they are actually, however this war ends up turning out, I mean, look, as we titled the episode yesterday, it's already a disaster. It's a disaster right now. The latest numbers are that, I saw it was reported over 550 Iranians dead. Haven't been able to get good numbers on the Israeli casualties thus far. Just like 5 Americans have died, not counting I think it was 3 and like a dozen wounded in Austin in that blowback terrorist attack. So, however this goes from here, all of these political leaders, Donald Trump and Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth and all of them, they are in many ways more guilty and responsible than George W. Bush and those guys. Because these, unlike George W. Bush, he at least had the excuse, as dumb as it was, that 9/11 changed everything. Yes, we used to have these views. You know, George W. Bush, if you remember the year 2000, for those of you guys who are old enough to remember, he ran on a humble foreign policy. No nation building, no policing of the world. The military should only be used to fight and win defensive wars, is what George W. Bush, the candidate, said. But as he was leading the country into 20-year catastrophic wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, he said 9/11 changed everything. This is different now. We got attacked. And the attack came out of Afghanistan, and it was aided by Saddam Hussein. Okay, well, the first one was true, the second one was a lie. But regardless, he at least had something to say. These guys have nothing. They have nothing. No major thing has changed. We haven't been attacked. We don't live in a new world, and they can't even pretend we live in a new world. They're just saying, oh, Israel was going to do it anyway, and therefore we had no choice. Just for more on this before we really break this down, let's go to Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House. He also had some comments on this yesterday.
To me, the most critical point is that this was a defensive measure, a defensive operation. And why is that? I took some notes, and this is not classified, so I'll tell you what I think is important. Israel was determined to act in their own defense here, with or without American support. Why? Because Israel faced what they deemed to be an existential threat. Iran was building missiles at a radical, a rapid clip, to the point where our allies in the region could not keep up. As you know, Iran has long vowed to take out Israel, wipe it off the map, and they have long seen that as a critical threat to their very existence. Because Israel was determined to act with or without the U.S., our commander-in-chief and the administration and the officials I just named had a very difficult decision to make. They had to evaluate the threats to the U.S., to our troops, to our installations, to our assets in the region and beyond. And they determined, because of the exquisite intelligence that we had, that if Israel fired upon Iran and took action against Iran to take out the missiles, then they would have immediately retaliated against U.S. personnel and assets. We have troops in harm's way, and we have many Americans in the region, and that was of great concern. If we had waited for all of those eventualities to take place, the consequences of inaction on our part could have been devastating. We don't know at what magnitude, but you can assume, because it is common sense, that if Iran had begun to fire all of their missile arsenal, short and mid-range missiles, at our personnel and our assets and our installations, we would have suffered staggering losses. And if we had waited to respond before acting first, then those losses would have been far greater than if we had done what we did.
Okay, so there'd be even more Americans dead. So here you have, okay, just to be clear, we have the Secretary of State National Security Advisor and the Speaker of the House, confirming that this is the reason we went to war with Iran. We went to war with Iran because Israel had decided that they were going to attack Iran. And we had solid intelligence that the Iranian response was not only going to be to send rockets and missiles back at Israel, but it would also be to target our bases, our soldiers, and we would have had a lot more of them dead. So yeah, we got, a couple planes shot down and a few Americans dead and a dozen or two injured, but it would have been worse than this. This is the answer they're giving. Now, of course, the major problem with this answer is that it just leads to many more questions than it does answers. And in fact, this is kind of right at the heart of the political dynamic in America over the last 2+ years. Really, this is something that people like me and Scott Horton and our camp of, libertarian non-interventionists have been talking about for much longer than that. But the American people broadly have really been talking and thinking about this since October 7th of 2023. And the thing is, it's like this. This is the reason, it is the heart of the reason why the American people are essentially forced to speculate about what exactly the level of Israeli control over United States politics is. And there are people who kind of specialize in scoffing at the people who speculate over this. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist or something like that. But it leaves no other option than for people to speculate about the power of the Israel lobby, blackmail operations a la Jeffrey Epstein or something like that. Or maybe that's what was really going on here. How many of these people are compromised? How many of them are threatened? Quite frankly, it leads people into, let's say, being quite hostile toward